Okay, so the first song is "Speak to Me," which is a kind of instrumental track, and I think it was credited to Nick Mason. So he's getting some royalty checks for that song, which is, like I said, a bunch of sound effects, and then there's a couple of speaking voices. And speaking voices is a theme that recurs on the album a lot. Roger Waters asked a bunch of people in the studio a bunch of questions. He put them on like cue cards, and he sat them down with a microphone and asked them these questions and looked for honest answers. And they took these recorded answers and kind of just interspersed them throughout the album on many songs. And we'll mention it as we go through the album. So there's comments like, I'm not frightened of dying, or I've been mad for effing years, things like that. The song Speak to Me starts off with this heartbeat, which is actually a kick drum symbolizing a heartbeat. And that kick drum symbolizing a heartbeat symbolizes the beginning of life, so birth. That's what I perceive with that song. And when you see Roger Waters or David Gilmour in concert and they start with that song, you get so excited because it just moves you, especially that low end of the kick drum. It's just so exciting, and it gets clearer as it progresses. It eventually climaxes into this either Claire Torrey or other female vocalist screaming, and that transitions into Breathe. And it's just a very exciting, different intro with all these mechanical sounds, including the heartbeats. So if I were to rate this song, I would give it an 8 because it's exciting. It has a lot of different themes in it. It doesn't have any really melody, and that's why I'm giving it an 8.
Cool.
Yeah.
Simon,
I think yes, I agree with the hobby. I think the clocks thing came from Alan Parsons didn't he a quadraphonic recording of for something else, and they decided to use some of it on here. So it's not specifically done for here. They just thought they'd do it. I think it's that thing. Clock ticking is time is one of the great themes on here, and also the sort of manic laughter as well. It's kind of portend of one of the themes as well. And, so yeah, I mean it's you can't skip it, definitely not, because it's the intro to the album and it sets the mood for the whole thing. And that's right. Well, I should say, Michael, you remind me. One of the people Roger Waters put these cards out and then on the table. Someone got various people to do it, including Paul and Linda McCartney. They did it, but apparently their answers were deemed to be they were trying too hard to be funny, so they were not authentic enough. So they weren't included. None of their answers were included. And they went with the Dorman of Abbey Road, Jerry O'Driscoll, and various other people.
Hi, Ivan.
Good morning, Ivan. And so I too am giving it an 8 because I think it portends the album excellently, and gives it that. And I should say that the helicopter type noise at the end is I think it's made on a VCS3 on a synthesizer.
Awesome.
Which is
well, for me, we talk about this nearly in every episode that the album journey. It's the start of the album. It's introducing us to what's to come, and the concept. They set out to do a concept record basically based around life, death, and everything in between. So Speak to Me, I mean, it's got little snippets also. There are the talking parts, but the snippets of the helicopter noise, the cash register noise, which is in Money, like the snippets of those things that reoccur in there. It's like an introduction. Bam, this is what we are. But it's also an introduction, in my opinion, it's an interlude into the first song, which the first song to me is Breathe in the Air. So I might give away my rating to Breathe in the Air here. So I'm going to give it 10 out of 10 because the way that it's you can't listen to Breathe in the Air without Speak to Me before it.
Well, there's a couple of songs like that on the last two songs. Yeah.
And that's the theme of the record, and that's going to be a recurring thing for me is the way I'm rating some of these things because I see them as maybe one song, two parts, but one song. And look, it's the build-up interlude into Breathe in the Air. It's an amazing, innovating sonic exploration for its time too. Let's be honest. 10 out of 10.
Okay, well, we'll come back and talk about Breathe, obviously. So So Speak to Me, apparently, for a lot of my friends, was the beginning of the freak out, on the album because this album in particular for a long time in my environment meant that you were a participant of other things, recreational. So it was the beginning of the freak out, and you know, and rightly so, because it is pretty weird. And I think you guys are right. It's setting you on a journey. It's a concept album. You can't skip it because it is weird. It's wonderful in that weirdness, isn't it? It's just yeah. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 too. But I dig where Brad's going, because that makes sense. So 8 out of 10. Michael, the next song.
Breathe in the Air. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album. It's also one of the most complex. I mean, it goes from 2 chords, an E minor of sorts and an A seventh, and just the 2 chords against each other sound so good. And they play it at this tempo that's just, it breathes. And the sound of the drums, the sound of the ride cymbal and the snare drum is just so incredible. It's just one of the best drum recordings I've ever heard.
Wow.
And just the pace of the song is just fantastic. And David Gilmour is using a couple of different guitars and a couple of different sounds on this song. So he's using a pedal steel guitar with a slide, and he's got a delay pedal on that sound, and it just sounds fantastic. And he's setting up the song with this slide part. And he also has a Stratocaster, his Black Strat, which sold for $4.3 million or whatever it sold for. He's got his famous Black Strat going through a Univibe pedal, which is a kind of Leslie speaker simulator pedal. And the sound of that is panned into one ear, and the sound of the lap steel guitar is panned into another ear. So you have all of these dimensions happening and these parts kind of layering together. So a lot is happening. And then after the 2 chords go on for about a minute, there's a couple of different chord changes that almost sound like jazz chords. And there's a Classic Albums documentary on YouTube, and you can buy it on Amazon, I'm sure, where Rick Wright, the keyboardist, says that he took one of the chords from Kind of Blue, Miles Davis.
Yeah.
He wanted to do a chord change from G major to E minor. And the typical way of doing that is going from a G major to a B major and then landing on E minor, which is what he didn't want to do. So he actually took this chord from Miles Davis's Kind of Blue record that was the perfect chord and also a nod to Miles Davis. And it led them back into this E minor chord. And it was just harmonically different and interesting that they added these jazz chords to a otherwise 2-chord song. The other thing I want to mention is that David Gilmour did the vocals, and he doubled himself, and he harmonized with himself very well. That's a kind of hard thing to do, and sometimes you don't have the voice to do both parts. But David did both for Breathe. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just one of my favorite songs on the album. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, yes, I think that, and also I'll point out, like I do often, is that in 1973 you had to go and sing it live. You know, it's not auto-tuned, it's not fiddled with. You know, you went in the studio and you sang it to yourself, a harmony, and that's really hard. You know, to do it that well, speaks volumes of him as and I think he's not necessarily picked out as a great singer, but I think he is a great singer, David Gilmour. You know, he sings, and his guitar playing is, for me, that's where his emotion comes out. You know, he's quite a British guy, quite reserved, quite, quietly spoken, but that the passion in the feel that he has in his playing, I think is astonishing, really. So I'm since a fan of, massive fan of David Gilmour and his playing and the way that he does things. And I know he kind of operates in a very kind of pentatonic thing, but it doesn't sound like blues very often. I know it's blues, but it sounds like him. He has managed to take in that blues kind of thing and make his own slant on it. And I think that's it's one of the greatest compliments you can give anybody, really. You play 3 notes and it's them. And if you can do that on a guitar, hats off to you, because I think that's seriously impressive. And I think you could say that about David Gilmour as a thing. Yes, I remember lying out on my parapet, and looking up at the stars as Nelson was it Nelson? Was it Nelson who was saying that in some island or something? What was he doing? Anyway, D2 was in Western Pacific. I absolutely, breathe in the air, and you're lying on the parapet watching the stars. Breathing is the perfect thing, and kind of to bring on that, to take me back to that place, and that lying out, and not thinking about breathing and stuff, and looking up at the sky, and that thing about the Tom Petty thing. The future is wide open. When you're 15, that is the future, and it's wide open. and this is about what you'll be doing, what you'll, smiles you'll give and tears you'll cry, things for the future that you'll be doing. It's and then he does the Run Rabbit Run bit, which always sends a tingle down my spine. When they come into that Run Rabbit Run, I don't know, you get that real feeling that of something that has some substance to it. I think, for me, it has a substance, has a story to tell, and an idea, and a view. And I think that view of life being Run Rabbit Run is, I'm sure we've all felt that, the rat race and all of that. And for me, that was a thing, it was something to come, really. Yes, Warren, you see, I didn't partake in the smoker. It's a bit early for me, but it's certainly that. So I give this a 10. As I say, it's part of my 15-year-old self, and one of the greats. I think it's beautifully, as you say, Michael, beautifully recorded, beautifully done. The parts, and it has that kind of soaring quality. Great solo from David Gilmour. Love that. Love it all. And that, the lap awesome. And the thing is just brilliant. So I'm giving it a 20 out of 10. I'm going Brad scores.
Oh, you're starting the 20 out of 10s.
Yeah. Why not? Start as you mean to go on.
Brad.
Do it again. Go around
again.
Okay,
so it, the build up from Speak to Me into Breathe in the Air, it's like a breath of fresh air, sort of transitions to that. Beautiful chord progression. There's so much space between the notes. The univibe, that's univibe pedals when they're used the way Gilmour did, and like Hendrix and that. They always remind me of this. I picture music in colours and textures and things, and I always picture univibes like honey dripping slowly, warm honey dripping. It's kind of got that sort of texture to it. It's beautiful, the univibe use on this song. There's a really beautiful amount of echo in this as well. I love the harmonies and the double track vocals by Gilmour. The lap steel guitar just adds like a really wonderful spacey feel. It's that Duo 1000 double neck thing that he had. So look, you guys know what I've already scored at 10 out of 10. And it's never a skip.
Look, I agree with you guys, and thank you, Michael, for the chord introduction to the song. Appreciate that in-depth research that you're offering is appreciated, and there's a couple of people already making comments about that in the chat, so thank you. Simon and Brad, look, I agree with you guys. I'm just going to mention, I loved the steel guitar. The lap steel guitar was just something when I first heard it, and right through the whole album, that part of the song just resonates with me, and it's just, again, you've mentioned it, Brad, the space that's in the song. It's a wonderful example of how a song can give you a great sense of space. And Simon, you hit that on the head too by saying, the engineering, it's the way it's engineered and mixed, and that's not easy to do in 1972, but these guys did it, and look, it's a 10 out of 10 for me. It's never a skip. I love the song.
Do you think, Michael, one of the things we talk about here, my theory is that records now are recorded and mixed visually, because you can see them. You can see the tracks on a monitor, on a computer monitor. Right. That you record and mix with your eyes. So you say, "Oh, look, there's a gap there." Whereas then you had no eyes. All you had was your ears to listen to. And when it was, recorded it, and that kind of, I feel that sense of space, it would be different now, because you will be able to see the tracks, and you'd be thinking, "Oh, I'll just put some extra things in there into that." When actually, that thing about having that space is what makes it so beautiful. And that difference, of having to, and I know they sort of went over to the 5.1 surround sound version, because they used to take a 5.1 surround sound PA on tour with them.
Right.
This is astonishing to have, in a hall you'd set up the four corners, and you can imagine that being an experience of a, tremendous experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And also too, don't be scared, guys, to put your rankings for the songs in the chat too. We'll acknowledge them as we go through the through our tracks. So if you disagree with us, feel free to have a crack. Michael, the next song.
Before we go to the next song, there was one last comment I wanted to say on Breathe. Simon mentioned Run Rabbit Run. After Gilmour sings Run Rabbit Run, Rick Wright does this like organ gliss. It's kind of when you just like move your hands up the keyboard or whatever you're playing, and it just sounds so great after Gilmour sings Run Rabbit Run. So listen out for that organ kind of feature. And that's something also that this album is so good at. The complements between the vocals. So what is being played after a vocalist sung? So we call them comps for short. So either it can be done by anything. It can be done by a drum, guitar, bass, keyboard, whatever.
Wow.
So that's just called comping. It's the space after a vocal is sung. It could be a drum fill or anything. So it's just perfectly chosen in every song. So the Run Rabbit Run line, there's that organ thing. And you also mentioned the spaciness. This song also kind of sets it up for space rock, this album.
Yeah.
Because the slide guitar kind of reminds the listener of previous songs like David Bowie's Space Oddity, which has the slide guitar, which makes you think of going into space. Or even Elton John's Rocket Man, which also has that slide guitar with a lot of reverb. So that's why people associate, I think, this album with space rock.
Well, yes, and Moon, of course. As the people who just gone to the moon. Well, yeah, just to be really obvious. But I mean, that thing about, I mean, Michael, I'm old enough to, I remember the moon landings. I remember watching it on telly and stuff, and the kind of that global excitement that those things engendered, in that excitement about technology, space, find a frontier. Sorry, but going out into space and exploration and doing that was right, right in the forefront of people's thinking. So I can see that that's why lots of people were engaged with that on some levels, which I think this is on some levels is about.
Thank you for that added comment and point, Michael. We appreciate that. That's the reason why we do these shows.